She slapped the billionaire's black wife, and seconds later, she regretted it. The scent of roasted coffee and warm pastries filled the air, a stark contrast to the sharp tension at the cafe's counter. Chloe, a vision of polished elegance in a crisp white blazer and designer jeans, tapped her foot impatiently. The line was moving at a snail's pace, and her phone was glued to her ear. "I just don't understand, David," she said, her voice a low, exasperated hiss. "It's like they enjoy being slow. And the people, my God, it's a parade of mediocrity in here. I just want my damn coffee so I can get back to civilization." She rolled her eyes, her gaze sweeping over the bustling room with disdain. Her phone call was about a huge deal David was closing, a deal that would make them both ridiculously rich. The thought of that money, that immense fortune, was all that was on her mind, making her feel superior to everyone around her. She was a woman on the brink of being a true millionaire, and these simple annoyances felt beneath her. A woman with kind eyes and a simple black dress, holding a small paper bag, accidentally bumped into Chloe as she was stepping away from the counter. A few drops of Chloe's drink spilled onto her pristine white blazer. It was a minor incident, easily solved with a quick apology and a napkin. But Chloe saw red. The image of her perfect outfit, now blemished, was the final straw. She whipped her head around, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Are you kidding me?" she snapped, her voice carrying over the gentle hum of the cafe. "Watch where you're going. Do you have any idea how much this jacket costs?" The woman's eyes widened slightly in genuine surprise and regret. "Oh, I'm so terribly sorry," she said softly, reaching for a napkin from her bag. "Let me help you with that." Her voice was calm and gentle, a stark contrast to Chloe's fury. Before we dive deeper into this journey, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. But Chloe wasn't listening. The rage was a torrent now, fueled by a day of small frustrations and a sense of entitlement. "Don't you dare touch me," she spat, backing away as if the woman's touch was a disease. "Some people just don't have a lick of common sense. You people are always in the way." The woman stopped, her hand frozen mid-air. Her expression shifted from regret to something unreadable, a flicker of pain in her eyes. Chloe's heart pounded, a strange mix of adrenaline and a twisted sort of satisfaction. The cafe had gone silent. All eyes were on them. The woman just stood there, her simple presence a silent challenge to Chloe's outburst. It was a feeling Chloe couldn't stand. She felt like she had to do something to regain control, to show everyone just how important she was. And in that moment, in a flash of unbridled arrogance and rage, Chloe did the unthinkable. Her hand flew through the air, and a sharp, sickening slap echoed through the quiet cafe. The sound was loud, undeniable. The woman's head snapped to the side, her eyes closed for a moment. A few people gasped. Chloe's own hand tingled, but she felt a strange vindication. She'd made her point. She was in charge. When the woman slowly turned her head back to face Chloe, there was no anger in her eyes. There was no defiance. Instead, there was something far more devastating, a look of deep, profound sadness and compassion. A single tear, slow and deliberate, slid down her cheek, leaving a glistening trail. It wasn't a tear of pain from the slap, but a tear for Chloe. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on Chloe. She could feel every eye in the cafe on her, a collective stare of judgment and disbelief. The slap had felt righteous in the moment, a perfectly aimed strike of power, but now, seeing that single tear roll down the woman's face, it felt hollow. The woman didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, didn't even rub her cheek. She just stood there, her gaze a mirror reflecting the ugliness of Chloe's own actions back at her. It wasn't a look of pain, it was a look of pity, and that was 1,000 times worse. The pity of someone who seemed to have nothing for someone who had everything. Chloe's chest tightened. She took a step back, her hand dropping to her side, still tingling from the impact. A lump formed in her throat. She looked from the woman to the faces of the cafe patrons. A young man was shaking his head, a look of disgust on his face. An elderly woman shielded her granddaughter's eyes. The barista behind the counter stared, his mouth agape. The feeling of shame washed over Chloe in a tidal wave. She had always prided herself on being sophisticated, in control, a woman of means who commanded respect. But in one brief, horrible moment, she had behaved like a monster, and everyone had seen it. I didn't mean to," Chloe stammered, her voice a weak whisper. The words felt like a lie even as she spoke them. It was an accident. She knew it wasn't. She had meant every ounce of her frustration and rage. She just hadn't meant for it to end in this horrifying public spectacle. The woman, still silent, just slowly nodded her head as if she understood. She turned to leave, her back straight and her movements graceful. As she walked toward the door, a murmur rippled through the cafe. People began to talk, their voices low and filled with condemnation. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. "She just slapped her for spilling a little coffee." The shame was suffocating. Chloe's face burned. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air and never be seen again. She had just made a colossal mistake. She watched the woman walk away, a simple, dignified figure in her black dress. Chloe felt an unexpected, urgent need to apologize, to make things right, but her feet were rooted to the floor. She watched the woman reach the door, a silent shadow of grace moving through the now hostile crowd. The cafe manager stepped forward, his expression hard, but before he could speak, a voice rang out from the back of the room. "Sweetheart, wait for me. The driver is here." The voice was male, deep, and confident. It was a voice that sounded familiar. It belonged to the kind of person who commanded respect, someone of status, someone who probably had more money and fortune than she could ever dream of. Chloe watched as the woman turned her head and gave a small warm smile in the man's direction. The man was coming toward them, but Chloe still couldn't see his face. The woman stepped out the door and a sleek black car pulled away from the curb. Chloe felt a new wave of fear wash over her. She didn't know who the woman was, or the man with the powerful voice, but she knew she had just messed with the wrong person. Chloe stumbled out of the cafe, the oppressive weight of her shame following her like a shadow. The sharp scent of fresh air did nothing to clear her head. The judgmental stares of the patrons felt like daggers in her back. She fumbled in her purse for her phone, her hands trembling. She needed to get away, to call someone who would understand, someone who could put this whole awful incident into perspective. Her phone screen lit up with David's name, a welcome sight. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "David," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Chloe? Hey, what's wrong? You sound upset," he said, his voice a steady, confident bomb. "I've got some amazing news, so pull yourself together. We're on for tonight." Tonight. She had completely forgotten. The dinner with the billionaire client. The most important business deal of David's career, one that would cement their future, their immense richness and influence. The thought of all that money had felt so exhilarating just hours ago, but now it felt like a cruel joke. How could she, a woman who just slapped a stranger in public, possibly be fit to sit at a table with someone of such a high caliber? "Is everything okay?" David pressed, his tone shifting to concern. "No, David, not really," she admitted, her voice cracking. I made a terrible scene at the coffee shop. I got into an argument with someone, and I lost my temper. It was awful." David sighed, a sound of frustration. "Chloe, I told you to relax today. We need to be on our best behavior tonight. This meeting is everything. Mr. Sterling and his wife are old school. They value discretion and a quiet class more than anything. This isn't some flashy millionaire who wants to show off his fortune. He's a true gentleman. His wife, from what I hear, is even more so. She's a philanthropist, a woman who's dedicated her life to helping others, despite all their money. They're a power couple, but they use their power for good." Chloe felt a new, colder kind of dread creep up her spine. A philanthropist. A woman dedicated to helping others. It was the complete antithesis of the person she'd just been. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She hadn't just embarrassed herself, she might have jeopardized David's entire career. She had to find the woman and apologize. She had to. I know, she said, her voice now desperate. "I'll be fine. I need to find that woman. I have to apologize." "Don't worry about it now," David said dismissively. "Focus on tonight. We'll be meeting them at La Bellevue. I've booked a table for 8. Just be yourself, but a calmer, more refined version of yourself, okay? This could be our big break." As David talked about the restaurant and the deal, Chloe's eyes scanned the street, searching for the woman in the black dress. She wasn't there. She was gone. She looked around, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over her. "By the way, honey," David's voice chimed in just before he hung up, "you're going to love his wife. Everyone says she's one of the most incredible women you'll ever meet. I can't wait to introduce you to her." The final words hung in the air, a premonition of something Chloe couldn't yet comprehend, but that filled her with a profound sense of unease. Chloe spent the rest of the day in a blur of nervous energy. The weight of her morning's actions was a heavy cloak she couldn't shed. She chose her most elegant dress, a deep emerald green that complemented her fair skin, and meticulously applied her makeup, trying to hide the telltale signs of stress. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw not the polished woman she presented to the world, but the one who had acted so cruelly in the cafe. The thought of facing the esteemed Robert Sterling and his virtuous wife was daunting. She had to be flawless, impeccable, a picture of grace and composure. This was the most important dinner of their lives, a moment that could transform their future, and she couldn't allow her past mistakes, however recent, to ruin it. This deal would grant them more money and more richness than they could ever truly need. David met her at the restaurant, his face a mask of anxious excitement. La Belle Vie was a symphony of soft lighting, hushed conversations, and the clinking of silverware. The kind of place where immense fortune was a silent, assumed presence. They were led to a discreet corner table, where Robert Sterling was already waiting. He was a distinguished man, his silver hair and tailored suit exuding an understated power that was more intimidating than any overt display of wealth. He smiled warmly as they approached, his eyes crinkling at the corners. His gaze was kind and thoughtful, the kind that made you feel seen and valued, not judged. "David, Chloe, so glad you could make it," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "My wife is just finishing up some last-minute things. She'll be here shortly." The conversation flowed easily, driven by Robert's calm and engaging manner. He spoke of his business not in terms of profits and assets, but in terms of innovation and community impact. He was a true philanthropist, a man who saw his wealth not as an end in itself, but as a tool for change. He told stories about building schools in developing countries, funding medical research, and creating sustainable living programs. He spoke with a quiet passion that was infectious. Chloe listened, fascinated, but a nagging sense of dread remained. Every word he spoke about his good deeds was another stab of guilt in her heart. She imagined him hearing about what she had done that morning, and her face burned with a renewed sense of shame. "The work is important, of course," Robert said, his gaze drifting toward the restaurant entrance, as if anticipating someone. "But my wife, she's the true force of good. She reminds me every day that the greatest wealth isn't measured in money or assets, but in the lives you touch." He chuckled softly, a genuine sound of warmth. "She insists on handling some things herself, even with all our fortune. She says it's her way of staying grounded, of remembering where she came from." He leaned back in his chair, a look of profound love on his face. "She had to make a quick stop before coming here. You'll see when you meet her. She's a one-of-a-kind. She insists on doing her own shopping for her charity. It's a little quirk, but it's what makes her so special." Chloe nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The thought of this paragon of virtue, this woman of immense goodness and generosity, was making her increasingly uncomfortable. She just wanted the evening to be over. She saw a figure enter the restaurant, and her breath hitched. The person was a tall woman, her hair pulled back neatly. Chloe couldn't see her face, but she had a familiar air of quiet grace. The woman was wearing a simple, dark-colored dress. As the woman walked toward their table, Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of pure, unadulterated fear. Chloe's heart was now a frantic drum in her chest. The woman was moving with a quiet confidence that seemed to part the sea of patrons around her. There was an undeniable elegance in her posture, a dignity that had nothing to do with designer clothes or expensive jewelry. It was a grace born from within, and it was deeply familiar. Chloe's blood ran cold. The image of the cafe, the slap, the single tear, it all came rushing back with a clarity that was more terrifying than any dream. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. This was a high-end restaurant, a meeting with one of the most powerful and rich men in the country. The woman in the cafe was simple, unassuming. But as the figure drew closer, the details solidified, and the terrible truth began to dawn on her. The simple black dress. The calm, composed way she carried herself. It was the same woman. David, oblivious to Chloe's internal turmoil, was standing up, a wide smile on his face. "Robert, your wife is here," he said, his voice full of polite enthusiasm. "We've been looking forward to meeting her." He had a look of genuine admiration on his face, the kind he only reserved for people with an immense fortune or an inspiring reputation. The woman walked directly to their table, a gentle smile on her face. Her eyes, those kind sorrowful eyes from the cafe, met Chloe's, and the smile didn't falter. There was no flicker of recognition, no hint of a knowing smirk. It was as if she had no memory of the morning's incident, or perhaps, as if it was a fleeting moment that held no significance for her. This was somehow worse. Chloe felt a wave of nausea. Robert Sterling stood up, his face lighting up with a love so profound it was almost tangible. He took the woman's hand in his, a gesture of pure devotion. The woman looked at Chloe and then back at Robert. Her eyes were warm and serene, a stark contrast to Chloe's rising panic. David looked between the two women, a puzzled expression crossing his face. He seemed to recognize the woman from the cafe too, but the context didn't compute. His brow furrowed in confusion. This woman, the one Chloe had so cruelly insulted and slapped, was the esteemed wife of the man he was trying to secure a multi-million-dollar deal with. It was a cosmic joke, and Chloe was the punchline. The woman didn't sit down immediately. She stood there, her presence commanding the air around the table. David, still confused, finally spoke, his voice tentative. Your wife, Robert?" he asked, a hint of disbelief in his tone. The question was a silent plea for an explanation, for a logical reason why this simple woman was here, at this table, with a man of such immense richness and influence. The suspense in the air was suffocating. Chloe felt like she was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. All eyes were on Robert, waiting for his answer. Chloe's entire future, her chance at a life of comfort and luxury, hung on his next words. The dinner, the deal, their immense fortune, it all felt a million miles away. All that mattered was the truth, and the truth was about to be revealed. The silence was a vacuum, pulling all the air from the room. David's question hung in the balance, a lifeline of denial that Chloe desperately clung to. But Robert's face, a canvas of pure love and admiration, confirmed the horrifying truth. He beamed at the woman, his eyes crinkling with affection. With a tender gesture, he took her hand and gently brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles as if she were royalty. "David, Chloe," he began, his voice a soft, proud rumble. "I'd like you to meet the love of my life, the reason for my sanity and my success. This is my wife, Sarah." Chloe felt the world tilt on its axis. Sarah. The name was a thunderclap. The simple woman from the cafe, the one she had so casually humiliated, was the wife of the billionaire whose business was their key to a future of limitless fortune. The woman who, according to David, was a paragon of grace and goodness. The irony was a physical blow. Chloe's meticulously constructed facade shattered, leaving her exposed and trembling. Her face drained of all color, her lips parted but no sound came out. She was frozen, a statue of pure, unadulterated shock and regret. Sarah's gaze, still kind, fell upon Chloe. There was no triumph in her eyes, no "I told you so." Only a deep, calm understanding. It was as if she were seeing Chloe's soul, stripped bare of all pretense. Sarah stepped forward, her hand still held by Robert, and spoke with a voice that was as gentle as a morning breeze, yet held the weight of mountains. "Chloe," she said, her voice a balm. "I believe we've already met. In a cafe, this morning." The words were an admission and an absolution all at once. Chloe finally found her voice, a broken, desperate whisper. I'm so sorry," she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't know. I was so awful. I'm so sorry." The words tumbled out, a flood of confession and remorse. She looked at Robert, then at David, whose face was a study in profound confusion and dawning horror. This was not the sophisticated woman he had wanted to introduce. This was a mess. Sarah, still holding Robert's hand, smiled gently. "Chloe, it's all right. I know." She turned slightly to face Robert. "I was on my way back from a charity run. A small incident. But it was nothing." She looked back at Chloe, her expression softening even more. "When you slapped me, I didn't see a woman who was cruel. I saw a woman who was deeply unhappy and in pain. And for that, I felt compassion." Her words were an unexpected dagger to Chloe's heart. She had been so consumed by her own arrogance, her own sense of superiority, that she had failed to see the simple humanity in the person she had so cruelly judged. The real slap wasn't the one she had delivered, it was the realization of the person she had become. A person so driven by the pursuit of money and richness that she had lost her way. You see, Sarah continued, her voice gaining a quiet power, the greatest fortune in the world can't buy kindness. It can't buy peace. I was on my way to deliver supplies to a local children's hospital. Our foundation just received a large grant, and I wanted to be there to see the joy on the children's faces. That, to me, is true wealth. Not the number in a bank account, but the moments of human connection and the joy of giving. It's what keeps my feet on the ground. That's why I was shopping for the supplies myself. I needed to feel that connection. Tears streamed down Chloe's face now, not just from shame, but from a profound, soul-deep revelation. The woman she had so easily dismissed was a true millionaire, not just in money, but in spirit. She had been handed a life lesson in the most brutal and unexpected way. Her entire worldview, built on a foundation of entitlement and material desire, was crumbling at her feet. She had to do something, say something, anything to atone for her actions. She felt an urgent need to ask for forgiveness, to prove that she was not the person she had shown herself to be. She was ready to grovel, to beg. But Sarah simply extended a hand towards her, a gesture of pure, unadulterated grace. Chloe looked at the hand, a symbol of everything she had rejected, and her own hand, still feeling the phantom sting of her slap. She could not bring herself to touch it. It was too much. Chloe stood frozen, staring at Sarah's outstretched hand. It was a simple gesture, yet it held more power than all the money in the world. The weight of her guilt was immense, and she felt unworthy of such a generous offer of peace. Sarah's eyes, full of compassion, seemed to understand her internal struggle. She didn't press. She simply lowered her hand and spoke, her voice still gentle. "Chloe, it takes a lot of courage to feel this kind of shame," she said. "But what you're feeling right now is not the end of your story. It's the beginning. The biggest mistake is not the one you make, but the one you refuse to learn from." Sarah then shared a brief story about her own past, a past that Robert clearly knew and cherished. She spoke of growing up with very little, and how a kind stranger had once given her family a place to stay after they lost everything. That act of simple, selfless kindness had shaped her worldview more than any subsequent fortune she had acquired. "That woman didn't have a lot of money," Sarah said, "but she was the richest person I've ever met. She taught me that true wealth isn't in what you have, but in what you give. And that kindness is a currency that never depreciates." Chloe's tears flowed freely now, but they were no longer tears of shame. They were tears of profound realization and a dawning sense of hope. The barrier she had built between herself and the world, a wall of arrogance and entitlement, was finally crumbling. She looked at Sarah, this truly amazing woman, and she saw a path to redemption. Dropping to her knees without a second thought, Chloe clasped her hands together and looked up at Sarah, a heartfelt plea in her eyes. "Please," she choked out. "Please forgive me. I was so wrong. I will never be that person again." Sarah knelt down to meet her, taking Chloe's hands in hers. "I forgave you the moment it happened," she said softly, her thumb gently stroking Chloe's hand. "The real forgiveness you need is from yourself. The best apology isn't just in words, it's in actions. I believe you when you say you want to change." Robert, who had been watching the scene unfold with a pained but understanding expression, finally stepped in. He put a hand on Chloe's shoulder and helped her to her feet. "My wife has a saying," he said, a warm smile on his face. "If you have enough to get by, you have enough to give." Sarah started a new initiative this morning to provide medical supplies to a children's hospital in the city. "We're short on hands and need some help. We would be honored if you would consider joining us, not as a formality for this deal, but as a chance to find out what true richness feels like." Chloe looked from Robert to Sarah, her heart full. This was not just a business offer, it was a second chance, an opportunity to rebuild her life on a foundation of empathy and purpose, not just the accumulation of a fortune. She didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes," she said, a sense of relief flooding through her. "Yes, thank you. I want to help." Weeks later, Chloe, Sarah, and Robert are working together at the children's hospital. Chloe, no longer in designer clothes, was laughing with Sarah as they organized supplies. The deal between David and Robert's company had gone through, but for Chloe, it was no longer just about the money. It was about something much more profound. The final shot is of Chloe and Sarah, side by side, their hands a blur as they place supplies into a box. Chloe's face, now glowing with a genuine joy she had never known. The woman who once slapped a stranger out of arrogance had found her true worth in an act of kindness. The final lingering sight is a close-up of a small card Chloe is now holding, a picture drawn by one of the children at the hospital, with a simple handwritten message, "Thank you for the kindness." The message wasn't about the supplies, it was about the simple gesture of human connection. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, share this video and tell us in the comments, what part of this journey moved you the most? There's another story waiting for you, and it might just change the way you see the world. Thank you so much for watching and see you soon.